Hey everyone, my name is Penny Zanker, and it's time to reset. This podcast goes beyond just navigating change. It's about new ways of thinking about how you can approach challenges, how you can shift your mindset when needed, create some space and grace for yourself so that you can rethink, recharge, and reprioritize when and where needed. Are you ready to unlock your full potential? Thank you for hitting play and sharing this next episode with me. It's time to reset. Hello. Today's conversation is about something that many people, they feel it, yet they struggle to name it. We live in a time where mental health has really grown into people's awareness, yet, there's clarity about how to work with our emotions, but it still feels like we understand we need to do that, but it still feels kind of challenging and difficult to name what those feelings are. And people are really feeling overwhelmed these days. They're feeling reactive. They're feeling unsure as to whether they're experiencing a signal to slow down or to push through or to ask for help. Like, what is that gut telling us? What are these signals of stress telling us? And sometimes it's really confusing to figure that out. And so my guest today has spent her career helping people to understand what's happening beneath the surface and giving them language for these experiences so that they can move through them. Kati Morton, she is a licensed marriage and family therapist, a best-selling author, and one of the most trusted mental health voices online. Since 2011, she's helped millions of people make sense of anxiety, of burnout and trauma and everyday emotional challenges by translating clinical insight into practical understanding. And so today we're going to explore how awareness can really become agency for us and how emotional clarity creates stability, which we can all use, and how these small reset moments, if you've heard me speak about my work, these spaces that we create for ourselves, these reset moments, they can change the way we relate to ourselves and each other. So without further ado, Kati, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Me too. So what I want to start with is, many people today, they can name what they're feeling, but they still feel stuck. I kind of want to start there because there's so many emotions that people are experiencing today. So how do they go about naming them? And then if they've already named them, how do they deal with it to work through them so that they can move to the other side of it?
Love that question. And naming them is hard. I realized this when I was writing my first book. I asked a bunch of my friends and family to tell me like 5 emotions they'd felt that day. I was going to put it it's in the book, but I wanted it to be handwritten. So I was like, write it out and give it to me. Mm-hmm. And everyone but my mom's boyfriend couldn't do it. They were like, what do you mean? What do I feel? Like, how many of these, how do I pick what list? Where are these feelings? They felt very.
Well, is that because they're having 30 different feelings? Or, I kind of always thought that most people lump them into like sadness, anger, like this is like the top 5, and they don't realize that there's all these nuances of all of those.
I think it depends on the person. I would assume that my mom probably felt a lot and was like, I don't really know which one to pinpoint. I would assume my husband and even one of my good friends hadn't tapped in. So they're like, I don't even know where to start. And I think that's really common for a lot of people. What you mentioned, I love that you mentioned like anger, sadness, envy. We can call those kind of like primary emotions. And those are, I love the feelings wheel. You can go to feelingswheel.com and check it out. But the center of the wheel it's filled with those emotions. And out from there, we can get more nuanced, like maybe I'm angry, but I'm actually irritated, right? And so if you are struggling to name it, I encourage everybody to start with those primary ones.
Great. So leading on to what you're saying, what's the benefit of further refining them into those broader feelings?
It feels more authentic. I think that's the piece there. And then we get to know ourselves better because there's a huge difference with how I might interact or how I might respond when I feel sad versus when I know I feel disappointed. Now, yes, they're kind of in that same avenue, but the experience is different, right? And my reaction or what I might want to do to change it or to communicate is going to be different. And so if we know with more specificity what the emotion is, that can allow for, I believe, greater connection in relationships and greater movement in our own life when it comes to healing and, being a better version tomorrow.
Yeah, I feel like when you get more specific, like anything, then you can address it, right? So
Exactly.
I'm depressed. Like, well, that's really, or I'm sad. Like you said, that's really broad. And so what specifically is making you sad? And then you can find out, well, is it sad or is it disappointment? Is it right? And I find like I remember I did something and I was trying to be like, why do I feel so emotional? I couldn't name the emotion either. And I had this interaction with somebody and I had said something that I wasn't proud of myself that I said. I kind of said something about someone else, and that's not really like me. And because they did, but I don't. Anyway, I was like, why am I so upset? And then I realized that I was embarrassed for
Mhm.
myself, that I wasn't true to my identity, but claiming it for myself as an embarrassment really helped me to work through it and let it go. Because I think when you can name it, it's easier to let it flow through you.
Exactly. The adage or the terminology people use a lot is like name it to tame it.
Yeah.
And yes, it rhymes. I wouldn't say so much tame it, but I loved how you said like it allowed you to like process it through and it gave you action or at least an idea of like, hey, what is this? Why do I feel like you said so upset? Like that's the word that we'll use to
Yeah.
name everything. I feel upset. Like yesterday I felt upset too because I kept getting these emails from this one person. They just seemed to be really aggressive. I'm like, what is this that I'm feeling? And I was like, I'm irritated. Like I have a lot to do and I'm irritated. But if I
Right.
didn't know that, I'm like, I just feel dysregulated. I feel upset. And it really helps. I think that's why it's important for us to start naming it. And I think the feelings wheel is a great place to start. I also tell people, and I mentioned this in my book too, that like if you have a tough time, if you're like, I don't really know, like this feels very overwhelming. I'm not sure how to identify. Because for some people it's easy, other people it's not. I encourage you to watch, and this is going to come as a shock to people, watch some reality TV. And the reason I say reality TV is because it's very dramatic, it's very over the top. And I want you to watch maybe 10 minutes and then pretend you're telling me, jot down the emotions that you saw. And then I want you to tell me why that those are the ones you picked. Like I saw anger, I saw excitement. How do you know? What was it? And that helps us better understand like how emotions can present themselves and how we identify them. And that in turn can allow us to more easily identify them in ourselves. And it's a practice. Many of us have been cut off or disconnected, stuffing things down, or just being, quote, upset. And so if you find yourself in that space, know that it's a practice. It's like a new muscle and we're going to build it up.
Yeah. Is there a feeling that you feel like people most often misunderstand?
Mm. I do believe that people often misinterpret hurt. I think that is the one that gets the most confused because to admit that we're hurt is a vulnerable thing to say.
Uh-huh.
Like, I've been wounded. And instead, we often go to anger because anger is
Yeah.
protective, right? It's like spines out. And so
Yeah.
when we've been hurt, usually we will say we're angry. And then when we figure out kind of like, well, where's that anger coming from? It's because so and so did or said this or, didn't do this thing they said they would. And we realize that we've been let down, that we've been hurt, we're disappointed. It's like anger takes over the brunt of the expression when it's
Hmm.
actually more of a sadness type of feeling.
Hmm. I mentioned something about signals early on. So are there any emotional signals you think that deserve more attention than others?
Yes, I think kind of going back to the like hurt/anger is that I truly believe in general we need to check in with ourselves more, myself included. Like just because I know better does not mean I do better. My whole book is a representation of that. I think that we as a culture, as people, need to get better at healthily communicating anger. There's a whole chapter in my book about my discomfort with anger because it feels very out of control to me. It's like a
Hmm.
wildfire and it can like jump and I don't like that experience. But I will tell you
You don't like the experience when someone else brings you anger, or you don't like it in yourself and
either
where it
way,
goes?
either way,
Okay.
anger as a feeling for much of my life, because no one in my family argued growing up. And so I didn't really know how to have a healthy disagreement and then to repair. Because even
Mm.
if you fight, you can come back together and you can repair. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to, and I'm sorry and
Right.
move on. I never saw that happen anytime I can't recall one time seeing that happen. So I didn't really know. And so any fight, any anger, any disagreement felt very overwhelming to me. And so I would avoid it at all costs. And I
Mhm.
truly believe, and I mean, I know as a therapist, but as a fellow human sharing the earth with everybody, I believe that the more comfortable we can get with our anger and communicating it healthily, the better off we all would be. Because there's so many instances in my life alone where if I had just communicated, hey, that really pissed me off that you did that, or I wish you hadn't have said that, that hurt my feelings. I communicated that, had that uncomfortable conversation, that would have saved me days, maybe weeks of ruminating on it, staying up at night.
I hear you. I hear you.
Thinking through all the ways, things I should have said, blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
That's why actually I'm a very direct person and I will share with someone because otherwise I ruminate, I worry, all of that kind of stuff. And I'm maybe very selfish in that way is wherever possible, I'd rather put it out into the open and resolve it, than let it also fester because it gets worse, right? The more we think about an emotion like that, the more we feed the fire.
Exactly.
And that certainly is not healthy at all.
No. And I don't even think you're being selfish. You're almost being, a good leader, like to start the communication. A lot of people have a tough time starting, like myself included. And so if you have someone in your life who is a little bit more direct, that's incredibly helpful because then you can have the dialogue, even if you don't fully agree, you've talked about it. And that, I feel like it saves us from that rumination, which robs future time, right? It's like, I don't really need to keep thinking about this one text message that went awry or this conversation that I had where I said something that I didn't mean, or they said something hurtful. I should be able to talk about it, air it out, apologize or whatever, and then move on. And that saves us so much energy.
Right. I'm going to let my husband listen to this afterwards so that he can hear you say that. Here's the way I work around it. And then I have another question for you is I call myself energy sensitive. So if, I kind of use that as forgive me, I'm a bit energy sensitive, but here's what I'm feeling or I'm experiencing. And so sometimes it's better received and sometimes not. So, but if we can find a healthy, easy way to make that conversation happen, then it does help.
I love that.
So let's talk about business for a minute, right? A lot of leaders, like we are experiencing more, is it true or not true? I don't know. But it seems like there's more overwhelm. There's more emotion that is coming to the workplace than ever before because of, just so many things, so much change that's happening, right? And so many different things that are happening at the same time. So leaders are really struggling how to deal with that emotion. And I'd like if you had any tips that you could share with leaders about, what I'm hearing from people is, oh, my people are too emotional. I need to baby them. They shouldn't be bringing this to the workplace. But I try to say, it is what it is. Like people are bringing it. So you're going to have to deal with it because you are the leader. What kind of tips do you have for these leaders who are struggling a little bit with that?
That's a great question. And I have kind of like a two-pronged approach. Number one, I have to agree with the fact that like you shouldn't be bringing that to work. Like there's a time and a place to express upset, to be emotional, to process your days and your experiences. I think we're lacking boundaries in between work and life. And I blame COVID for a lot of that because a lot of us came home with work and worked from home for a long time. And I feel like the barrier between work and home life just kind of got a little more diffused. And so there's a lot happening in our life. We're more connected than ever. You could name, there's a ton of reasons.
Yeah. And I think we should also add in there to one of those reasons is we are not good at setting and keeping boundaries.
No.
That's the other thing, right? So the boundaries came down, like the walls came down, but we still have to be able to set and hold boundaries, whether it's from a workplace perspective or whether it's from an individual perspective when the work oversteps their boundaries.
Yes, agreed. And to that point, I want to define boundaries for people because I find there's a lot of misunderstanding.
I like that.
Because boundaries, a lot of times people think, well, I told them, don't talk to me that way. Or I told them, don't call me on Saturday or asking for work to be completed at the last minute, let's say. And I'm like, cool, you put in a request. That's not a boundary.
I like that.
People can or cannot take you up on that request. They can say, I'll do that. Or, meh, I don't care. And that is why that's not a boundary and why it's a request. The boundary is I will not be answering emails after 5 p.m. on Fridays, let's say. Then if somebody emails you after 5 on Friday, you do not respond. That's you holding your boundary. The boundary is what you're going to do because that's all you have control over. And then let's say they ping you again or they try to call you, you don't have to pick up. And on Monday, you respond and you say, remember, I do not answer emails after 5 p.m. on Friday. And that's you reasserting the boundary. Essentially, you're reminding them of the request, but the boundary is what you do because we often forget this and we think that we can control other people. And unfortunately, we can't. We can only control ourselves. So every time you think, oh, they're not upholding my boundary, think to yourself, no one can uphold my boundary but me.
Right. That's totally true. I call it a rule. Like we make rules for ourselves and we communicate those rules. So, I don't work after 5 p.m. or whatever the thing is. And that means I don't take calls. I don't get on my, now you can decide when there's an exception.
Yep.
But that's your rule and you have to hold to that boundary, or I don't take requests from the office, after a certain period of time. And I find that might be more helpful than the word boundary. Like you said, it's a little bit of a wishy-washy kind of word. And it really means to set like concrete, more rules to me. Like it's more of a hard and fast rule. So I like that you define that. And I like the differentiation between request, right? And rule or boundary or whatever language you want to use there. So that's a great distinction. And so for those of you who are listening, make sure that you understand that you are differentiating between that and you have to hold that rule sacred, because once you break it, right, what I hear you saying is if I do pick up that phone on Saturday and I know that it's the office calling, then it's kind of like, if you don't want your children to eat chocolate, after a certain period of time, but you let them do it, then you're teaching them that it's okay to do it, right? It's the same thing. You don't want your dog to jump up, but you allow the dog to jump up, then the dog's going to keep jumping up. It's,
You're responsible for your boundaries, right? You're the one that has to hold them. And so I want to mention that especially with this, because if you're bringing a ton of emotional expression into work and you're maybe causing distress amongst your coworkers, or your boss has expressed like, hey, this is a little bit much, that's a good red flag to say like, hey, I don't think I have boundaries between work and life, and I need to figure out what those can be for me. So I'm putting that onto the worker themselves, like the employee. Now, when it comes to a boss, there are two things that I think they can do. Number one, I always encourage, when I speak at, different corporation stuff, I always encourage the higher ups to let people know when they're taking time off for like mental health breaks. Like we have sick days or mental health days, take them and let people know you're taking them, so that people see through, you're leading through example, that it's okay to take that time. Because some people are afraid to, and if they're not doing it, then if I do it, they worry about promotions or being overlooked for a project. So say it, talk about it, be open about taking that time, and encourage people to take their time too.
Absolutely. And I'd love to just build on top of that in terms of those are the mental health days, but also the blocks in your day that are scheduled for mental health, for resets, right? So that your lunchtime, for instance, I'm not available at this time. I'm out to lunch. This is my break, or I'll, whatever you say on these break points, I think is also really valuable for the leader to set that it's okay to block in specific times during the day so that you can reset and recover. Because my experience is that burnout comes from a lack of reset and recovery. It's not just about the workload. It's really about the reset and recovery process that we have.
Yes. And we need to have regular resets, regular recharges for our day. So yes, that's also equally important. Then the second piece I encourage, and this is a little bit trickier because we don't want to overstep, again, boundaries between I'm your boss, I'm not your therapist. However, I always encourage what I would call like back burner techniques. And what that is in therapy is like, hey, I can't cry right now. I'm in a business meeting, but I can acknowledge that, hey, I'm sad. And I can say, you know what, Katie, hold on to this for an hour. We'll cry when we get to our car. Then we can cry. That's okay. And so as a boss, I think it's okay to say, this sounds to me like a personal problem that you're struggling with. And I would encourage you to take care of this when you're at home. And I know people might be like, that's really harsh, but that's a boundary between work and life. If they're crying about a divorce they're going through, you can be like, hey, you have some mental health days. Let's take those. This is a personal problem that's affecting your work, and I want you to be here doing your best work. I always tell people, when you're worried about how something comes across, use the hug and roll technique. We give a nice compliment, like, you do such amazing work here. I love all of the great stuff you've been putting together for our company. And then we roll. However, this seems like a really stressful time. How about you take some time off? You go home. It seems like a home problem is affecting your work. And I know that that's not what you want. And I know that you've been doing great work here. So let's just take a little beat. And so you're kind of hugging, you're appreciating, you're acknowledging what they've done. And then you're rolling it away and being like, this really is not the place, you know, without being too hurtful, because people do need to understand that certain things shouldn't be happening at work. And certain things for like at home, you shouldn't be bringing work home and you shouldn't be bringing home to work.
Right. I like that, you're giving them as a boss, I'm just going to use some different words. You're giving them permission to take the time that they need to resolve their challenges. You're acknowledging that there's a challenge, and then you're giving them permission to take the time that they need and not, not bring it to work or resolve it at work, is to take the time that they need and then to come back when they're fresh or at least able to compartmentalize, right? So that that they are able to leave it at the door. Sometimes what I've done in the past when I've been in really stressful situations, I kind of use like a metaphor, where I'll like put it in the trash can, I'll kind of like bring it out and then, or write it down on a piece of paper, what I'm frustrated about, and crush it up and put it in the trash can, knowing that I can pick it up when I come back in, but that it's sort of like a symbol of putting it down, right? Or putting it in a box. And then, that gives you sort of closure. I know it's kind of weird, but
no, it's not weird at all. I did personally, I did internal family systems therapy for a little while. I won't get into the nitty gritty of what it is, but a part of that therapeutic work is that at the end of your session, you imagine all of the emotions, all of the memories, all of the things you're working on. You put them in a container of some sort. Now, mine that I visualized was like a big wooden, almost like it's like a big like bench kind of that you open up, like a huge trunk. And I would put it in there and I would lock it back up. And I think that that is really great. Whether you need to write it down in your journal and then shut it, you can bring your journal to work. I mean, I have mine right here. You write in it, you shut it back up.
Yeah.
You can jot things down, you can crumble it up, you can put it away for later. I think it is really helpful for all of us to have some of those tips and tools so that we don't fall apart when we don't have the time or space to do it. It's a little bit of emotion regulation is really what we're talking about here. Is like, I have enough emotional intelligence to recognize I'm overwhelmed. And then I have enough awareness to be like, hey, I can't do that right now. So how do I put it to the side, not to stuff and to never retrieve, but to retrieve later and to work it through, to think maybe on my drive home, I let myself kind of vent out and talk it out and cry. And then, I move on with my day.
Right. There's a time and place for everything.
Yes.
Yeah. Good. I think those were some really good tips that leaders can use to address that. Do you think that there is a habit that you've seen that is actually increasing anxiety in high-performing adults?
Ooh, I mean, there's a lot of different habits. I think one is our phones. And I know that that's kind of a crappy answer and people are probably going to be frustrated by it, but being accessible all the time and having notifications turned on is incredibly dysregulating. I don't think we realize, like there was a research study, I want to say in 2017, 2018, where they talked about the time that it takes for us to refocus when we are pulled from a task. So they tested people where they were sitting down, they were supposed to type up this paragraph and they had to kind of ad lib and add in their own things to it. So it wasn't just copying. And then they made little dings go off that sounded like a phone message to pull them away. And they would look and you'd see them try to look for the message and then they'd come back and they'd have someone pop in and ask a question and then go out. And each time it took them about 20 minutes to get back to that same level of focus. And so I want you to think about that like if we're pulled in all these directions, if we have our phone notifications turned on all the time, that means that we're losing focus and we're not able to actually finish tasks completely or in the amount of time we probably thought it would take because we're getting pulled all over and our phones are the number one distractors of that.
Absolutely. What I talk about is that we've actually become addicted to distraction.
Yes.
And that's the bigger problem is that the phone and, all the other things that are vying for our attention, the interruptions from, like you said, people coming into your office and, got a minute questions and things like that. And now there's Slack messages and people needing to get a hold of you on these different platforms for work that we've become addicted to it. Many procrastinators also can appreciate, that walk to the refrigerator or to get coffee or, you don't really want any more coffee. You're not really hungry. You're just looking to distract yourself or you need a proper break. But I believe that is the challenge is that we have such a heightened stimulated nervous system is fried. And so some people, I believe, can't even get back to focus even in 20 minutes, that they're just addicted to distraction and they're just looking for the next, dopamine hit or distraction. And so therefore we're in a focus crisis, in my belief.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. Because there's so many ways to pull ourselves from what we're trying to actually accomplish. And so I think our phone's the number one habit. The next, and the last one I'll really talk about, but there's many more we could get into. Another habit that I find to affect, especially when it comes to like workplace and leaders, is difficulty delegating clearly. I think a lot of people struggle to let things go. I've been creating content online for 14 years, and the amount of creators that still do each and every piece themselves, you'd be shocked. And it's because they're afraid to have somebody else try to do what they do. But you can't do it all. And also, I have to be honest, and we all need to be honest with ourselves, that we are not the best at everything. There's probably one thing that we're really, really good at, and you should figure out what that is, and that's what you do. And everything else, you work to find someone that can do a better job. Because I can edit my videos, but my husband worked in film production for 15 years. He does a much, much, much better job. He knows it more. Yeah. And so fine.
And he'll do it He'll not only will he do it better, but he'll do it faster, than you could ever do it. So absolutely, that's important. And to add to that today, delegation skills are the number one skill. Well, let's say in the top 10 skills that are going to be critical and what people are looking for when they're hiring, because that's what it is to work with AI, is we are delegating. And if we can't delegate effectively, not just the letting go part, but also the skills that are required to delegate effectively, that's going to make us much more effective, efficient, and keep us in our jobs in the future.
Yes, exactly.
Wonderful. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you feel like we need to share with the audience before we shut down?
Are there any other topics you want me to address or other tips? I'm happy to dig into anything more. There's always more I could talk about. But just
give us, the top tip that you didn't yet talk about that you think is something that you should leave people with.
Okay. One of my top tips when we're talking about control, because we talked about boundaries and trying to control other people, and we have coworkers doing things that maybe aren't appropriate. I think in general, when it comes to letting go of that illusion of control, right? Because we can't control other people. We can only control ourselves. My best tip for anybody who feels that, like, I'm trying to make other people do the things that I need them to do, in order to let that go, we have to recognize that it's not one action, it's a bunch of small actions. And so instead of feeling like, oh, I'm going to make this person work harder, I'm going to make this person happy, I'm going to do whatever to control somebody else, and then if not, it means I just have to completely push back and not care at all. Instead, consider a small action, like maybe I won't check in to see if they're working on that because I'm going to trust that they are. Maybe that means that instead of me catering the way that I interact with them to try to make them happy, I just am myself for this little beat. I know these sound like very slight and small actions, but those are truly the actions that change our life. Yeah. And so if you find yourself being a recovering control freak like myself, hello, recovering people pleaser, right? Pleasing nobody. You just have to consider that what small action could you take? I think for years I thought, oh, I need to make this big change. I need to, new year, new me, we say in the new year. And it's like these drastic shifts. Those don't last because big changes don't really improve us. It's the small daily changes. So maybe think of one thing you could do this week that would allow you to let a little bit of that control go, because I promise that will make the biggest shift in your life.
Absolutely. 100% agree, right? You start one little thing at a time and you just do that consistently, and then you can build on top of that 100%. Exactly. And that's why what I talk about is these reset moments, right? Is these spaces to recognize when we have an opportunity to do one of those small things, to recognize when we could hold a boundary, to whatever it is, maybe even to spark creativity or whatever we need to do, but to recognize those small spaces or create those small spaces when we need to, so that we can do some of this emotional regulation and really get in touch with where we are, or maybe even get in touch with where someone else is.
Yes, exactly. I love those little resets. It's always in the small moments, right? Take a beat, take a breath, decide versus react. It's always better.
Absolutely. So where can people find out more information about you before we close out today?
I'm all over social media, just Kati Morton. It's Katimorton. I always say like the salt. It's easy to remember. That's on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. I also have a podcast, Ask Kati Anything, that comes out every Thursday. And my books, I have 3 books, Are You Okay? Traumatized, and my newest, Why Do I Keep Doing This? They're available wherever you buy your books.
I think those are things that we can totally appreciate. So definitely, if you're listening, go check those out. Last time I checked, we're all human. So these are human elements that we get to get comfortable with and, get to know ourselves better and learn different strategies. And Kati's books are definitely going to help you. So thanks, Kati, for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Appreciate it. And for all of you, if you want a strong arc back to time to reset, right? That's the name of this podcast. This conversation should remind us that resetting isn't about fixing ourselves. You're not broken, you're human, as I just said. So it's about understanding ourselves well enough to, respond with intention, to be able to take those spaces and those moments to connect, to understand better so that we can move through it. And understanding creates that space and those small actions that we can take, as Kati had said, it changes everything. So thank you all for being here. My name is Penny Zanker, and we'll see you in the next episode. Hey, thank you for spending this time with me. It really means a lot. If you're feeling a little off, distracted, overwhelmed, stuck, or just out of sync, remember that's your signal to reset. And that's all it takes, just recognizing one reset moment at a time. So stay tuned for more tips, tools, tricks, stories, strategies, all here on Time to Reset. We'll see you in the next episode.